I really feel like there needs to be a manual for the woman after 35. Like I want to like tap her on the shoulder and be like, hey, I got to tell you, like everything about your lifestyle is going to have to change. But the one place that I think is the most important outside of stress and sleep is the metabolic system. And this is why, like, I sit in awe looking at the reviews on Fast Like a Girl. I never read my reviews this long, but the reviews keep coming in. Like, all my menopausal symptoms improved when I learned how to fast like a girl. So can we start this conversation with blood sugar and what changes at 35 as those hormones?
Oh my gosh. And you and I are talking ahead of this, that I was just writing an article for my newsletter about even something like stress and blood sugar. So blood sugar is glucose. They're the same, right? So you go get a fasting glucose. Some of you have a continuous glucose monitor, or you check your glucose at home with a glucometer. And we have resilience. We have the ability when we're a lot younger as my friend called it, the beer and pizza diet. We can stay up late. We can handle stress. We can eat like crap. And our body tends to bounce back. Not always, but it tends to bounce back like, okay, I got you. And then we seem to cross the threshold of 35. And because our hormones are shifting, which impacts the way that we can or can't handle stress, which impacts the way that we even utilize glucose in places like our brain, it all starts to shift. Now, it's not overnight, but it is this sort of subtle downhill slide if you're not paying attention. And this can result in things such as mental fatigue. So people go, I'm so tired. I'll go, can you go for a walk? Or is it studying something? Can you read a manual? And they'll go, oh yeah, I can walk for hours. I love walking my dog. I love walking on my neighborhood. I walk the beach. Oh yeah, you're right. It's the long mental focus that's hard for me. Helping my kids with their homework, reading a manual, reading through a lot of slides. Like I get very distracted and tired. Again, brain, right? Or they're like, well, I feel good. And then I'm hangry. It's immediately I go, I'm hungry, I'm moody, I'm quiet, or I got a headache. And so we start to get these subtle metabolic shifts that can also result in things such as our weight gain, changes around the middle in particular, that sort of spare tire change. And again, it can be subtle. It doesn't mean it like you wake up on your 35th birthday and all this happens, but these are the changes that we start watching for. Now, the reason this is so important is because our metabolic health impacts, just like our hormones, every single system in our body. It in fact impacts your skeletal system, your nervous system, your immune system, your cardiovascular system. I mean, absolutely everything. And so by tightening up, improving, focusing on your metabolic health at 35 and older, it's going to have literally system-wide benefits for the rest of your life. And that's where it's important.
So would you say going into your 40s, making sure your metabolic health are ready, like if you go in with your metabolic health off, this is going to get even crazier for you, this perimenopausal journey. But if you go in with your hemoglobin A1C around 5, you've got you can build a fasting lifestyle, like you're going in already metabolically healthy, then it'll be a much easier experience for you. Would you say
I find it over and over. The answer is yes. I find the women who go into their 40s with those solid numbers, glucose, hemoglobin A1C, insulin, leptin, triglycerides. So these are all easy labs that can be done. You can order them yourself often. Your primary care can order them. Insurance often covers them. And if you're in a great optimal range, these women, it's not that they'll not have no symptoms, but they tend to do better. They tend to have it easier than somebody who is pre-diabetic or diabetic or insulin resistant going into perimenopause, where we become more insulin resistant by default at that time. We tend to have better brain health if we're metabolically healthy compared to somebody who's not, because glucose plays a big role in whether or not our brain does or doesn't work. So some of things absolutely, everything from even like wound healing, recovering from illness. I hear this, women go, I just feel flu-like all the time, or I keep thinking I'm getting sick. I feel like, and I'm like, ooh, yes, estrogen does play a big role in that, but so does metabolic health, and they go hand in hand. And so it could just be a dialing up where you were at like a level 3 going into it, and now you're dialing it up to a level 8, whereas somebody who was down at a 0 or 1, they're only at a 4 or 5 when they come into perimenopause. And so it's this relative difference that I see in women with better metabolic health.
So with estrogen, we know let's just be more specific. I call estradiol the diva. I feel like she's like a diva who's like, hey, guess what magic I've been doing for you every month that you didn't even know. And now I'm going to go away. And on my exit, I deserve the full pomp and circumstance, because I'm out, and then you're going to notice me gone, and you're going to regret that that I'm gone.
Yeah.
So when estradiol goes away, you become more insulin resistant.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. And so the message is, starting at 35, really 40, but let's say it's now getting earlier. Like it's in your late 30s, you may notice your old tricks that used to keep you thin don't work anymore.
Yes.
Would you say that's
yes.
accurate?
And I'd say you probably have heard this too. Women are like, I thought I could just get away with. I haven't really had to do
Yes.
anything. I haven't changed anything, Mindy, and everything all of a sudden changed. Like, you're right. And now it's
Right.
time to make big changes.
Right. Okay. So, but then as you get deeper in, now you're 47, as you get deeper into the perimenopause experience, then there's this strange thing that happens where you look down, you're doing all your new right things. You got the fasting, you've got the food figured out, but then you look down at your belly and you're like, what the is that?
Yes. Yes. And in fact, there's even a theory I've seen it a bunch in the literature, and I see it given the amount of lab work that I look at, because when women have a lot of estrogen, we tend to have more estrogen receptors in our hips, our thighs, our booty. That's often the shape. That's where we gain our weight. If we're going to gain weight, not as much around the middle. It doesn't mean you can't. It just means estrogen plays a role of directing where fat goes. Testosterone and other androgen hormones, which we all have as women, likes to keep it around the center, the apple shape. And what happens is our testosterone doesn't decline usually at the same rate as estrogen. So we become relatively out of balance, testosterone and estrogen. We become relatively higher than testosterone. Even if it is going down, it's still out of balance relative to estrogen. So in a seesaw, testosterone's up and estrogen's kind of down. Because we have this imbalance, now all the receptors around the belly area are getting super stimulated. And that leads to that visceral adipose tissue gain, the weight gain around all our organs that's putting on the spare tire around the center. Now, other reasons can be for that: high cortisol, right? High insulin. Like, we have other reasons. But that decline, when you mention that estrogen's like, I'm outie, best of luck, I bet you miss me. That is one of that ratio is something they're starting to study in the literature to go, you know what? Estrogen really does play a role in relation to testosterone and where you're going to gain weight. It tends to move up as opposed to down, and can be infuriating for a lot of women who go, I'm doing all the things. I'm doing all the things, and my body shape just changed. And their weight on the scale may not change, but they do notice everything kind of moved up versus down.
So is there anything we can do for that? I will definitely tell you, I'm throwing a lot of things at my own body right now. And they're reacting very differently to things. Like, some things that didn't really work for me before are now really working. And I can share what those are. And some things that used to work for, keeping my weight where I want are not working anymore. So I've like, my toolbox for not just metabolic health, but loving the body I'm living in, is what I call it, has dramatically changed as I've gone through that experience. So let's just take the menopausal belly weight. Is there anything we can do that we know will work?
Okay, you know how when you're trying to get in and out of fat burner, sugar burner, and sometimes you struggle? It might be that you have a metabolic blocker that's at play here. Want to know what those blockers are? Click on the link above and I'll take you straight to a giveaway, and you can have my list of metabolic blockers.
And because weight gain is very multifaceted, I just wanted to point out that testosterone estrogen ratio that they're kind of looking at in the research, because it's new, it's very interesting, and it is something to keep an eye on, because some women will go, I don't want to go on estrogen, or I'm afraid of estrogen, or I don't think I'm a candidate for estrogen, but can I do testosterone? And then their practitioner's like, yep, let's put you on testosterone, and poof, they gain a lot of weight, especially in the middle. And they're like, what the heck? Where did this come from? This could be a contributing factor for that. So just keep an eye out for that if this happens to be you. Or your practitioner puts you on estrogen with progesterone and testosterone, and maybe the testosterone's a little higher than you need it to start with, and poof, you gain weight around the middle, and you're like, well, that's not what I wanted. Maybe I feel better, but I don't want all this extra weight in the middle because it's very inflammatory. So right now, there's like the blanket things for the weight, right? Where the weight comes. We hear it all the time. It's, are you eating enough protein? That women need a lot more protein than we think. We tend to under protein. And then going into menopause, we've gained weight. And so women cut back on calories, and that can include protein. 2 is the weight lifting heavy weights and getting that in to stimulate the use of glucose and the fatty acid. So what's stored in our fat cells are fatty acids, such as triglycerides. And what happens is when they are to be used, to be burned, when we don't have estrogen, we don't have estradiol, as women can struggle to make that mechanism. Like, the fat burning factory is just not as efficient as it used to be when you were in your 30s.
Yeah.
And so then the fatty acid is like, well, I can't get into the fat burning factory, so I'm going to get redeposited like in the liver or around the center area. And that can contribute to that. So it's, even with the weightlifting, can be really helpful at improving that. There are certain nutrients such as choline, phosphatidylcholine, or foods with choline, to help make that whole process work better. Same with carnitine. L-carnitine helps make that process a little better for some women. Then we get into stress, because stress, of course, plays a huge role when it comes to weight gain, blood sugar, all the things. And we know we become less tolerant of stress. We don't have the resilience we used to. We've often been burning the candle at both ends leading up to our 40s. And with the change in our hormones, our I call it the trampoline of life becomes more threadbare. So now you go to bounce on the trampoline of life and instead your foot goes through, or it's not as bouncy as it used to be. And so that cortisol impacts your glucose and your insulin, contributing to the weight gain. So there are obviously a lot of ways we can work with cortisol and help our body feel safe, our nervous system feel safe. And then lastly, of course, is the nutritional aspect. So fasting plays a big role in that. But then also, what do you have at the end of your fork? If you've been living on the beer and pizza diet all the way up until your 40s, it's probably not going to work into your 40s. If these are some goals of yours, this metabolic health is a goal of yours, time to make some changes.
Oh my God, that was a beautiful list. The other thing I would add in there that I've noticed, two things that I've noticed for my own self that I'm curious about. One is definitely more fiber. Yeah. When I put protein and fiber first in my meals, and I'm like, boom, I'm gonna eat. Like just before I popped on here, I was like, I ate a ton of microgreens and a whole bunch of tofu. I'm actually bringing tofu back into my life and soy back into my life. And so if I bring fiber in at every single meal with the protein, I feel like that tire around my waist shrinks. So how do you feel about fiber?
And here's one of the big reasons why. When we lose estradiol and progesterone, it has a negative impact on our gut health. So when we say that the change in hormones affects all 12 systems of our body, I literally mean all 12 systems, including your GI tract. So as an example, the decline in estradiol means in our GI tract, in your small and large intestine, we have little gates in between all the cells. They're called tight junctions. And think of it, like a toll gate or a police gate where it will allow certain things through, and things that are bad, it doesn't let through. You've got it let's get rid of those. Let's poop those out. So when we have a decline in estradiol and progesterone, it can cause a dysfunctional gate. And so now think of the gate between you and your neighbor's house. Instead of a nice tight gate that's keeping random people out, but keeps your dog and kids in the backyard. Now the gate's holy, or it's falling off, or, anybody can just push it, it falls over. And that's what it can be like in your large and small intestines. So that leads to more inflammation, because now things are coming into the gate. They're coming into the backyard. You don't want in your backyard, just like you don't want it crossing through into your body. And now the immune system gets involved. So now the immune system's pissed, and it's creating all of these inflammatory messengers. Cytokines is what we call them. And where's your immune system? Well, it's right there at the belly area. And so it's just going to contribute to weight gain around the middle or bloating, things of that nature. Now, fiber, prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics. Postbiotics are what our microbiome kind of poops out, the food for the large intestines. Now they can keep the cells down there, the microbiome itself, the bacteria, and then the cells that line the wall happier. So whether you are or aren't on hormones, even I'm an advocate for hormones if it's right for you, but at least fiber is a great start for supporting the whole microbiome. We're more microbiome than we are human. So we want to be real nice to our microbiome. I joke all the time. We don't want our microbiome to, rise up and rally against us. We want it to work with us. And so fiber can play a huge role there. And that's just one example of what changes in our GI. So if you feel like you're going through this transition or have transitioned into postmenopause, and you're like, yeah, I'm having heartburn or gas or bloating, or I just feel bloated all the time, this weight gain around the middle, more constipation or more diarrhea, like this is a contributing factor.
So then you got to think through the lens of the microbiome. Like those symptoms should take you back to, here's the microbiome.